If you've been told you need to balance your blood sugar, avoid carbs, stop eating fruit, wear a continuous glucose monitor, or make sure that your blood sugar never spikes after a meal, this episode is for you. This question actually came from somebody in my email community, and I loved it because blood sugar has become one of those topics where there's a little bit of good information, especially in the online space, buried underneath a whole lot of fear. And I don't want you to be afraid of glucose. I want you to understand it. Glucose is not the enemy, neither is insulin or carbohydrates. And your goal shouldn't necessarily be a perfectly flat blood sugar chart all day. Your goal should be a healthy body that can appropriately respond to food, movement, and stress, especially in our 40s and beyond. The good thing is that there's a lot that we can do to support that, so let's get into it. So there's a lot of women who have said to me, Claudia, my blood sugar is high in my blood work, so I probably should stop eating carbs. And that's not usually the best course of action. And honestly, eating little to no carbs can often make your overall health picture more complicated, not better. So when people talk about balancing blood sugar, they usually mean keeping glucose from getting too high or too low and helping your body regulate it appropriately. Yes, glucose regulation matters, but the wellness world has taken something that is physiologically normal and turned it into something that a lot of women are afraid of. Your blood sugar is supposed to go up after you eat. You eat carbs, your digestive system breaks them down, glucose enters your bloodstream, your pancreas releases insulin, and that insulin helps your cells use or store that glucose. That is normal physiology. If you eat a bowl of oatmeal and your glucose rises, that's what your body is supposed to do. The real question is whether your body can appropriately handle that glucose and bring things back towards baseline. That is a very different conversation. And it's a big reason why I don't really love the current obsession with CGMs or keeping your glucose perfectly flat. It's just not realistic. So let's talk about some lab markers that are worth knowing when you get your blood work done. So there's a few things that you'll typically see, like fasting glucose. That is the one that most providers will order. It is blood glucose at one point in time. Is it useful? Sure, but it's really just a snapshot. I don't give it much weight, to be honest. Then there's hemoglobin A1C or HbA1c. That's going to give you a broader picture because it reflects your average blood glucose over the previous 2 to 3 months. I prefer that marker. And then there's fasting insulin, which I also like to look at, which is the hormone that helps move glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. When your cells become less responsive to insulin, your pancreas may compensate by producing more of it to keep your blood glucose in range. If one fasting glucose comes back higher than you expected, or your insulin comes back elevated, don't jump straight into diagnosing yourself with a metabolic issue. I would look at the pattern, look at prior labs, and pay attention to your symptoms. And then, of course, talk to your provider and retest when needed. I want to give you some context around this because I know it can get really confusing. So I get my labs done quite frequently. I know how to read them myself. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to looking at labs. But when I recently had my fasting insulin done, it came back at an 18. Now, if I didn't know what I know, I would have freaked out and be like, oh my God, why is it so high? I don't think that I have insulin resistance for a number of reasons. My labs historically are pretty damn good. My glucose, my HbA1c, and my insulin are always in range, even from a functional health perspective. And our ranges are a little different than conventional medicine. We're a little more conservative, if you will, and we like to look for red flags so that we can take action on them. Now, that blood draw that I had done wasn't exactly clean. I had intentionally been eating in a surplus for months while focusing on building muscle. So I had gained some weight kind of on purpose. The night before I had my blood draw, I was at a fair with family, and I completely forgot that I had labs the next morning. So I ate typical fair food. I had sausage, I had French fries, and a big old lemonade. I have no idea how much sugar was in that thing. And I probably didn't fast as long as I should have either because I got home a little bit late. Now, could all of that have influenced the result? Sure. Now, I'm not ignoring that level of 18, but I'm also not panicking over it because, like I said, prior labs, my blood markers were pretty good. Now, I'm looking at this in context. I am also paying more attention to what I'm eating, making sure that I'm not eating a ton of sourdough bagels or rice all the time, but reaching more for fiber-rich carbohydrates. And then, of course, I'm going to retest in a couple of months under better conditions. So that's what I mean by looking at trends instead of obsessing over a single data point. You know, if you have real concerns, of course, you want to talk to your provider, but I wouldn't try to self-diagnose diagnose or freak out because somebody on Instagram said that your level should be whatever number they have deemed perfect. All right, so let's talk about carbs. They are so not the villain. Oh my goodness. This is where I think things have gotten a little out of hand. A lot of women have become so afraid of carbohydrates that they treat a sweet potato like it's a freaking Snickers bar. It is not, okay? Carbohydrates are one of the 3 macronutrients that your body needs, and carbohydrate-derived glucose is an efficient fuel source, especially for your brain and higher intensity activity. So if you're an active person, you're strength training, you're walking a lot, you're doing cardio and trying to build or maintain muscle, which is the advice that all of us get in midlife, right? Your carb needs are going to look different than somebody who is sedentary. There's no universal right amount of carbohydrate for every woman. It really does depend on your goals, your activity level, your total intake, metabolic health, and of course your individual response. So instead of asking, are carbs bad? Ask what type of carbohydrates you're currently eating. Start paying attention to that. How much are you eating? What does the rest of your meal look like? Rice, potatoes, and fruit are not necessarily the problem. Either are beans or lentils. It's the overall plate and what you're eating generally that matters. So one of the easiest strategies that I teach is to stop eating naked carbs. You may have heard this term before, meaning you don't build a meal or snack around carbohydrates alone with nothing else. So if you're having something like oatmeal, for example, you want to add some protein to it, whether it's egg whites or eggs on the side, and a little bit of fiber and a little bit of fat. Maybe that's a little drop of creamer or a little bit of butter if you want, or coconut oil, or something like ground flaxseed or chia. That's going to give you a little bit of fat and fiber, so that would be my preference over the butter and the oil. If you're having something like rice, you want to pair it with chicken or fish, some vegetables, and again, a little healthy fat. Maybe it's a little bit of olive oil. If you're having fruit, you want to add some Greek yogurt or some cottage cheese, not because carbs are dangerous, but because pairing carbohydrates with protein, fiber, and a little bit of fat slows digestion and changes the glucose response. All right. I'd also lean towards higher fiber, minimally processed carb sources more often. So things like beans, lentils, legumes, berries, vegetables, sweet potatoes, whole grains, and seeds. And yes, a reasonable serving of rice can absolutely fit into a healthy diet, especially if you're an active person. My own plate is pretty damn simple. I usually have a ton of vegetables, a good protein source, some sort of more starchy carb like a potato, and a little bit of healthy fat. And there's one thing that may surprise you. Protein also stimulates insulin secretion, and amino acids can influence glucose metabolism. But I don't want you to hear that and panic that protein is bad too. Your body needs all 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, doing their jobs together. So I want to talk a little bit about glucose monitors. And this is not to shame anybody who uses them. If you love your glucose monitor and it has given you a lot of information, wonderful. They can genuinely be useful for certain people, especially for medical reasons. But if you're a generally healthy person without diabetes, I don't think that most women really need to be wearing a CGM all the time and watching for every spike. So here's what concerns me about them is you may eat something like a banana and your glucose goes up and you may panic. Then you may eat a banana again with maybe a little bit of almond butter or peanut butter, and it may go up less. So you have deemed that the bananas are bad and almond butter is good. Then you work out, your glucose goes up, and now you're afraid of exercise too. That's how a piece of technology ends up dictating what you eat, when you eat, and how you feel about perfectly normal physiological responses. This is when tracking can be a little obsessive, right? I talked about my thoughts on tracking in a recent episode. I think it was episode 118. So go back and listen to that because I do think that all this tracking is not necessarily helping a lot of us. And then there's stress. Stress itself affects glucose. When you're stressed, your body releases hormones that make energy available. And that's your body doing its job again. The same thing happens with exercise. During higher intensity activity, your body may temporarily increase glucose production to fuel your working muscles. So yes, you can sometimes see a glucose spike during or right after a hard workout. That doesn't mean that the workout was bad for your metabolic health. Regular exercise generally improves insulin sensitivity and glucose handling over time. So please don't stop working out just because your glucose monitor spiked. But hopefully, if you're wearing one of those, you have somebody coaching you through it so you understand what that all means. And we can't ignore muscle. Muscle is one of the major places that glucose goes after you eat. This is why I keep saying strength training isn't just about looking toned, although that's a nice bonus. Muscle is metabolic tissue, and as we get older, maintaining and building it becomes increasingly important. It's also why I don't want you spending all your energy avoiding carbs while doing very little physical activity, or not eating carbs while you're doing a lot of physical activity. Neither one of these situations is a good one. You want to use the carbs to build your muscle mass and recover. You want to walk more. You want to move after meals and give your body a reason to use the fuel that you're feeding it. And that brings me to undereating. I've talked about this in previous episodes too. I've seen many women in my coaching practice who simply do not eat enough, or they're eating very little during the week, then binging on weekends, or they're not eating most of the day and then binging at night. What do you think that's doing to your blood sugar? It's not a great situation. So you end up exhausted, hungry, moody, your sleep is crap. And in many instances, you're always thinking about food or snacks, right? Because you're ravenous and you're having all these cravings. So chronic underfueling is its own stressor, and stress hormones influence glucose regulation. So if your blood sugar isn't where you want it, the first question isn't necessarily, what do I need to eliminate? It may be, am I eating enough? Am I getting enough protein and fiber? Am I eating enough carbs for my level of activity? Am I strength training? Am I sleeping well? Your metabolism is not a single lab value. And now this is where I want to bring it back to women in their 40s and 50s specifically, midlife. As we move through perimenopause and menopause, estrogen is going to change. You've heard me talk about this many times. It goes up, it goes down, and eventually she starts to decline. And alongside that, many women see shifts in their body composition, their muscle mass, their activity, their sleep, their appetite, and where they tend to store fat. All that will influence your metabolic health. So if your body doesn't seem to handle food quite the way it did in your 30s, you're not imagining it. Something has shifted, but that doesn't automatically mean that you need to go low carb or no carb. It means that we look at the whole picture, your hormones, how much muscle you're building, the amount of movement you're getting, what you're eating every day, what your sleep looks like, what your stress looks like, your body composition, and your labs. It does help to have that data. So again, if your labs come back out of range, I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to start taking a million supplements. Look at the overall pattern. Has it changed over time? If your fasting glucose, insulin, or A1C is elevated, you want to talk to your provider about what needs to be repeated or evaluated and take an honest look at your nutrition, your activity, your sleep, your body composition, meaning your muscle to fat ratio, before deciding whether you need to really cut carbs, add supplements, or medication. There's absolutely a place for supplements or medication for some people, but I don't want you just to reach for berberine or chromium or inositol or whatever the supplement of the month is just because somebody on Instagram said that your glucose needs optimizing. Work with somebody who really understands this and who can guide you on all of it. All right, so the takeaway here is this. Your goal doesn't have to be perfect blood sugar. It's metabolic flexibility. I know it's a little fancy term, but it really means that it's a body that can eat a meal, appropriately release insulin, use glucose for fuel, store what it needs to store, and bring things back to normal. The goal is to build muscle that can use glucose, a body that moves often, gets enough food, plenty of fiber-rich whole foods, protein, healthy fats, carbohydrates that support your activity and goals, and enough sleep. Cannot stress that one enough. So the next time somebody tells you to keep your blood sugar perfectly flat, avoid carbs, or wear a glucose monitor to micromanage every single bite, take a step back and ask better questions. What do my labs actually show? What's the trend or pattern? What are my symptoms? Am I moving enough every day? Are my workouts effectively building muscle? Am I eating enough in general? And how much sleep am I getting? That's how we get out of fear-based health strategies and into informed health strategies. Not another food to fear, not another number to obsess over, just better information, better context, and the confidence to make decisions that are based on your body. All right, if you have a question that you would love me to dig into on the show, send it our way to support@claudiapetrilli.com, and I will see you next time. Hey, before you go, if you're resonating with this podcast and realize that your symptoms are anything but normal, my comprehensive program, the Perimenopause Method, may be a great fit for you. My team and I help women in their mid-30s to early 50s improve symptoms such as fatigue, disrupted sleep, anxiety, erratic moods, bloating, and much more. We do this by utilizing advanced testing, a personalized plan tailored to you, women's health and hormones education, and ongoing support so you never feel alone and you get results. If you're ready to commit to your health and feel like yourself again, but even better, check out the link in the show notes to learn more about the Perimenopause method. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not, nor do I act as a doctor or any other medical professional. I am not providing healthcare, medical services, or attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any physical, mental, or emotional disease or condition. The information shared is not intended to be a substitute for the professional medical advice provided by your own medical or mental health provider.